Back to heart. Sun still rising on a worn out town, paint peeling off them old brick signs. Folks work hard, keep their heads down, trying to hold on to better times. Used to leave your door unlocked at night, now everybody's got a camera on. Still got faith if we get it right, we can fix what's gone wrong. Ain't about talk, ain't about show, it's about the way we live, the way we know. Let's get back to dirt roads, back to porch lights, neighbors standing up when it ain't polite. Cold beer, hard true stars up above, a little less noise and a whole lot of love. Red, white, blue ain't a trend we chase, it's sweat on your shirt and calloused hands grace. If we're gonna stand, we don't stand apart. We gotta get back to heart. By the water line, kids still laughing like nothing's changed. But there's a whole lot of talk on the screen these days, and not enough folks saying it face to face. We ain't perfect, never claimed to be, but we know what matters when the dust all clears. It's family, friends, and a little dignity, and standing strong through the years. Ain't about left, ain't about right, it's about showing up when it's time to fight. Let's get back to dirt roads, back to porch lights, neighbors standing up when it ain't polite. Cold beer, heart true stars up above, a little less noise and a whole lot of love. Red, white, blue ain't a trend we chase, sweat on your shirt and calloused hands grace. If we're gonna stand, we don't stand apart. We gotta get back to heart. Ain't no filter, ain't no spin, just who we are and where we've been. If you fall down, we pull you up, that's the kind of country built on us. Let's get back to dirt roads, back porch lights, neighbors standing up, yeah, ready to fight. Cold beer, heart true stars up above, a little less talk and a whole lot of love. Red, white, blue ain't a flag you fold, it's a way of life and a code we hold. If we're gonna stand, we don't stand apart. We gotta get back, yeah, back to heart. Yeah, back to us. Woo. Back to us. Back to heart.
Good evening and welcome to Apex News Above the Noise. I am Kyle Thompson.
And I'm Craig Blanton.
Craig, tonight we are joined by a good friend of both of us, a local elected official. We are joined by Wil Rhodes, and we are going to be discussing property valuations. He's our local PVA. He's going to talk about assessments and things of that nature. But I know a lot of people over the last few weeks have been talking about why am I getting assessments? What does a property value administrator do? Where does my money go? We're going to answer all those questions tonight. But the most important thing I think a lot of people have to understand is real property taxes are nothing new. In fact, the first real property taxes were actually created in the Massachusetts Bay Colony back in 1634. And in 1820, the state of Illinois and the state of Missouri actually created the first real property ad valorem taxes. And then followed by Tennessee in 1834. Kentucky did when we passed the second Constitution. So these are not things that are new. It's something that has to be done. It is a state law, and we'll explain that here in a second. But before we do that, I want to introduce you guys to Wil Rhodes. If you don't know Wil and I have been friends for quite a while. But Wil, if you get a chance, just introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. Again, Wil Rhodes. I'm the Franklin County PVA. I want to thank Kyle, you, and Craig for having me here. I think it's a good thing y'all are doing. an informed public is always a better public in my mind. I was born and raised here in Frankfort, Kentucky, attended Frankfort High, and then graduated from Kentucky State. After that, I worked for the Department for Local Government, first as a local government advisor, and then as executive director of financial management and administration. And we dealt with all local municipalities, whether it be counties, cities, and special government entities. So I've been around local government all my professional life. And now I'm the PVA. I was appointed by Governor Beshear after Kelly Lang's retirement in November of 23, and was then elected in May of 24. So yeah, we've been here about 2.5 years, and loving serving the community. My wife works in the schools. I've got 3 kids in school, like twin daughters that are 11 and a son that's 5. So we're always doing something, and I appreciate again you guys having me.
Well, we can't thank you enough for being here. Obviously, a lot of folks have asked a lot of questions online, and our commitment to the community is that we are going to be providing answers to folks when they have questions like this. But I can't let you get away without going ahead and saying Brandon Moore told me to get you to say what a great experience you're having with the Franklin County football program as well right now. He just wanted to throw that in because you're a Frankfort High graduate, I'm sure. So,
I've got to give it to Eddie James and Brandon Moore and all the people out there running the Flyer football. It's my son is playing in the flag program, having an absolute blast, and they've got a good thing going out there. Although I am a Panther, I'm glad to see things going well, and they're providing opportunities for kids that that aren't necessarily in the Franklin County school system, but to get out there and have some fun and be a part of the awesome work that they're doing.
well,
We're ultimate homers.
we are.
When we broadcast the games.
Yeah,
it's big time homerism.
They're fun to watch.
They
They're
are.
fun to watch.
And Will and I, just so you guys know, when things are happening, whether football games or other things that are happening, we're texting back and forth, and we're so he
Yeah.
keeps up with everything. So I'm sure Brandon and Eddie will appreciate the shout out, but they wanted me to make sure I got that in before we started talking serious stuff here. But one of the most important things I think people ask is, why is it that the property value administrator actually does his job? And when you and I were discussing with Craig, it's a law. It's in the Kentucky Constitution. It's not even just a statute. It's in the Constitution.
Correct.
You don't have an obligation to avoid it. And I think that's important first and foremost to outline why it is you do what you do. And as you can see right here, all property not exempted from taxation by this Constitution shall be assessed for taxation at its fair cash value, estimated at the price it would bring at a fair voluntary sale, and to any officer or other person authorized to assess values for taxation who shall commit any willful error in the performance of his duty shall be deemed guilty of misfeasance, and upon conviction thereof shall forfeit his office and be otherwise punished as may be provided by law. So, just starting out, Will, doesn't sound like you have a lot of option when it comes to this if you want to be able to keep your job.
Correct. And Kyle, you correct me if I'm wrong. You're an attorney by trade, but this was last enacted in 1891, I believe. So it's nothing new. And as you alluded to earlier, with the first ad valorem taxes way back in the colonial days, I mean, that ad valorem is Latin for according to value.
Right.
So it's nothing new. It's something that has to be done by law. It's not something we woke up and decided to do. We're just here, or made up the policy. We're just here to do that in a lawful manner. And one thing I want people to take away from this, not just what we're talking about now, but this entire conversation, is that when everything is assessed at 100% cash value, it's fair and it's equal, and no party is shouldering more of the tax burden than another because one house is not properly assessed and another one is because they recently had a transaction with that.
One of the questions that Craig and I have gotten all for the last week, as some of these assessments have come out, is where do these taxes go? I mean, if they're all going to the county or they're all going to the city, well, then they're doubling their money and all these other things. But that's not necessarily the case that they're going directly to city and county government. And I think we wanted to talk about that. If you want to discuss how this works.
Yeah, there are a myriad of taxing districts that use the tax rolls that this office places on assessed property, and then they take those numbers and then decide what their tax rate is going to be based off the overall valuation for the county or the city or individual school district, whatnot. And that goes obviously to our schools to provide for education for our young population, but also the teachers, that salary, and then and just typical government stuff. You know, we want to. I think I've heard Craig here say before, the number one duty of government is to provide safety, and that's going to your law enforcement and your EMS, your firefighters, stuff like that. And then obviously the other things we enjoy, such as parks and you know, the new Lakeview park being worked on out there. I'm sure some money that is going to that. So everything that the government provides and other districts provide, library, it goes to that.
Well, another question I had was from the public was about assessing privately owned buildings. You know, like all the buildings downtown, or the retail stores, the WalMarts, Lowe's, down to just the stuff that we got downtown. You assess those too, correct?
Yeah, we assess everything in the county that has value. Even if something's exempt, we assess it. We're supposed to put a value on any property in the county, whether it's exempt or not, commercial, residential, a church, anything. You know, as a matter of fact, when we went through the flood last year, somebody from the state came in and they actually paid for a flight to see, and luckily they did it at the river's crest. But nonetheless, they flew over it and they were able to drag and see the value of those parcels affected, and it clipped up into the Capitol complex, and that's almost $1 billion. And they said, "Oh my gosh, you all there, you've got this much damage." I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You clipped that line into the Capitol garage, and it captured that whole value. So,
Yeah.
but no,
Well,
we assess everything in the county, and a lot of people don't realize this. We're also responsible for the values that people get on their motor vehicle tax. So if you ever go down to the clerk's office and have an issue with that, they're going to say, okay, go upstairs and talk to the PVA, and you might show us an odometer or you know, something that's not known about the vehicle, and that value can be adjusted as well.
but you mentioned the flood. That was another question we got. I was going to save that one till the end.
I'll go.
I got a couple. Well, I got two questions specifically about homes that were flooded.
Mhm.
If they're in the area that's being rezoned now, will you all take into effect that the house is, you know, my word only, is basically worthless because it's got flooded and they've had to rip the walls out and everything, and all they got left is a shell? Because I've seen a couple that on Big Eddy that they
Yeah.
had to do massive work to.
Correct. And well, everything's according to value as of January 1st. So when the flood first happened, I called the PVA in Graves County and I asked him how he handled the tornado.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, it wasn't an issue because the tornado happened in December and everything's according to value in January." So,
That's rough. That's
but
rough.
But nonetheless, it's I've talked to some people down on Big Eddy and Travis Circle that are part of the buyout program, and I've seen documentation showing that. So it no longer represents value because it will never be sold. It'll be automatically go to the county, and I know there are
Right.
a few in the city as well. So they have zero market value. Now
What about the ones they're going to reoccupy?
yeah, it's that damage as of the January 1st, which of this year is depending on their variance of completion. Then you know that'd be a case by case basis, and I encourage
So
them to
it
come in and
could
talk.
come into play that their house got wiped out in April. They were Johnny go-getters and they got it fixed by December, and they're back occupying the house again. Did any of that come into play for the next year's assessment?
Well, you would be technically right. I mean, if the say the flood would the flood happen in April or May?
Yeah, April.
So the flood happened in April, and they, you know, called their old football team and had 20 guys in there and had it back up to snuff in a month. Then there would be no there would be no
Okay.
decrease really. But I know a lot of people, it's not like that. They're
Jordan,
kind of deciding if they're going to walk away. They've done some demo. Maybe they've laid linoleum down when they would have laid custom flooring. Absolutely, come in and talk to us and let us know what you got going on. And I know down there it's a case by case basis. But
Mhm.
the ones that I do know that are in the buyout program and going to walk away, then yeah, those are absolutely going to zero as far as their tax bill. Yeah.
so Will, when we talk about, you talked about that bucket of all of these different taxes, so that an individual doesn't receive essentially, 14 different tax bills every
Right.
year. The PVA essentially assesses those funds go in on their real property taxes, and then they are divvied up. Where, depending upon where you live, though, you have different tax rates, even in the city of Frankfort and in Franklin County. So
Correct.
I wanted people to see this. A lot of people don't know that just because you may live a street over from an individual,
Yeah.
for example, in downtown, you may be in the old city in one area, and you may be a street over, and you're in city annex, as they
Hmm.
call it. So
Hmm.
it greatly differs there. So where this is old city, this is the highest rate, if you will, in the city right here, and uh, let people know where is Old City, so they know if they fall in that area.
So Old City is essentially your Frankfurt Independent School District.
Okay.
It encompasses South Frankfurt, across the river into downtown, down to about where Jim Seafood used to be on
Yep.
Wilkinson Boulevard, over into Bell Point, and then down about halfway, I think, to about Meager Avenue on Home Street,
Yep.
and then back into there. Um, and then about, I think it stops at Kentucky State University. So Montrose Park, Lindsay Avenue, all that up and through there on East Main is in what's called the Old City. So essentially, what you think of is downtown, I guess you'd say. But its boundaries are the Frankfurt Independent School District.
You didn't know you were going to be having a test today, so I'm impressed that you were able to name those
Yeah, that
boundaries.
was good. That was good. I didn't know it was that big either.
But I used to own, my law practice used to be right there on the corner of East Main, so I was in that old city area,
Right.
and it was significant, and you have to pay those city schools. The photo that we have up here, the graphic that we have, shows that 61% of those old city school is school payments to the Frankfurt Independent School District, correct?
Let me say this about the Old City School District. Over 70% of the Old City District is tax exempt.
Oh,
When you
correct.
think,
Yeah, right.
yeah, when you think about the Capitol, as we spoke about earlier, when you think
Right.
about all the churches, the state buildings, the federal buildings, nonprofit, all these exempt properties are in that area and they're tax exempt.
Right.
So that is a large reason why their rate is higher. But yes, looking at this graphic, if you had say it was $100 bill. Now this isn't your rate; it would be your payment. So let's, for argument's sake, say that your tax bill is $100. 61 of those dollars are going to the city school.
Right. Okay.
Where it looks like the cities it would be $12, the state is 6, the county's 11, library's $4, and then your cooperative extension, conservation district are $1, and then your health department's $4. But yeah, in all districts, the schools are the bulk of a property tax bill.
I think it's crucial what you mentioned, though. When you're talking about the courthouse, when you're talking about all the churches, when you're talking about the federal building downtown, anything owned by a government entity or a nonprofit, that's
Mhm.
tax exempt. So owning property in downtown, you end up getting a higher tax bill because you kind of have to carry that burden that
That
all.
burden shifted,
Yeah,
yeah.
it truly does. So, and for people who don't understand, government doesn't pay taxes to government. That's how it works. And same goes for nonprofits. So if you are a church or if you are a nonprofit organization, you don't pay real property taxes.
Right.
So, and that's again, these are not Will Rhodes laws. These are not the
Yeah.
laws just Franklin County. That's a nationwide deal, but especially in the state of Kentucky, there are specific statutes that prevent them from paying.
And think what we would get what the Frankfurt Independent School District would get if we assessed the Capitol building, the legislative annex, the state office building, the new transportation building, the Mayo Underwood. I mean, it would
Well,
be a completely different school system.
and I think it's important that you said that, Craig, because for years, and Will and I discussed this at the time, but there is a specific statute that says we understand that the state is exempt from taxes, so they call it a payment in lieu of taxes, or a pilot program, which essentially says, we understand that we have a burden on the streets, we have a burden on so we're gonna give X amount of dollars. Now, for about 50 years, it was right about $180,000 on average that they were paying, which is nowhere near what the trade-off was.
Might have been fair in 1970 when Governor Carroll instituted.
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, when that got started, one of the things that they did was they gave a fire truck to the city of Frankfurt in lieu of that, and that's kind of where that started. But 2 years ago, that's not right. 4 years ago, Governor Beshear essentially said we're making a one-time payment of about $1.92 million area to kind of make up for some lost, if you will, and that was done by the hard work of the city commission. But it's never been changed. So this year they will again receive about $192,000, which is about a 5% maybe of what the value should probably be. But again, that's money that is lost for mainly the independent school district.
Yeah, and again, it spreads that burden to those people that are in that district. I will say, I know that the superintendent of the city schools busted her hump to get in front of the Senate president, which is no small feat in itself, to get an audience, much less get something done. But from what I understand, the city schools have been budgeted $1 million per budget year in this biennium to go towards capital improvements. So hopefully that'll ease some strain there as well.
Yeah. Moving on to what they call the annex. This is the city annex. So if when you use that word, we're talking about anything outside of the downtown old city area, essentially, that you just talked about, but inside the incorporated boundaries of the city, correct?
Right, and not in the county. And as you know, being a city commissioner, those city boundaries, I think J.D. Cheney at Kentucky League of Cities called them a bowl of spaghetti.
That's correct.
You can have splinters off.
Yeah.
So I will not do fare as well on a geography test of what is annex and county as I did with Old City.
But it's important to note that once you get out of Old City, this 53%, that's county schools that goes there, and you have fewer larger areas and assessed values that are exempt from taxes. Now you have churches and some nonprofits and things like that, but it's a much larger area, so you have more homes and people living in those areas as well.
You have more property subject to taxable valuations for sure, and property tax, excuse me. But it's a much larger space, and it's more spread out, and is, I dare to say, on a taxable level, 5 or 6 times the size of the old city.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we talked about before I go on to the county is that the city property, however, it's fairly landlocked. There is not a lot of growth or even opportunities for growth inside what we would call the city of Frankfurt proper. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I mean, the city is the river is a tremendous asset of our community, and that's a debate for another time. But it creates geographically where we can and can't build into, and if we want to get across it, we've got to build these multi-million-dollar bridges. So that, and then the land to our north is not, some might say, not buildable on one side of the river, and then the other is pristine farmland.
Right.
So I think a lot of the growth as far as Franklin County is, we don't have a lot of land to work with.
That's correct, and much less inside the city. Now we moved to the county, and then this is your counties. If you're outside of the city, but you're inside Franklin County. So think of your areas like Peaks Mill, Bald Knob, even just past where the new Target is going to be. Those areas,
Right.
we're in county area at that point.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too, Kyle, is that last graphic had the school being 53% of your payment, and in the annex, and then you go to the county,
Yep.
and it's 62% of your payment. Well, at first glance, you might think, well, I'm paying way more. And that's just percentage of your payment. It's higher going to the schools because you don't have that that I guess it would be 9% difference going to the city payment.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that
You're not paying more. It's just a more of a percentage of what
Your
you
total
do
bill.
pay.
yeah. Again, there's 9 cents out of $9 out of $100 bill right there that you're not going to pay to the city because you're not in the city, and then that money just goes to the county. So the county, or excuse me, the county schools, because the
Right.
county's not making a whole bunch more money because where you
Correct.
live. The county schools are just getting a little bit of a bump there. So, but you're not paying more in taxes, and I think that's
No, it's just more of what you pay is going to that district because you don't have another one.
yeah. Perfect example. We are obviously the big issue right now. Craig, you want to ask something before I move on
Yeah,
to assessment?
we haven't touched on yet, but it's super important for Will and the PVA's office. Will, who sets the tax rates in these three different taxing entities?
Well, the tax rates are set by those taxing entities. Just with this county chart right here, the state has had their, they actually lowered their tax rate. I think it was 1.44 3 years ago, but it's down to what is it? Yeah, okay, there you go, Kyle. Thanks.
No
The
problem.
state is 1.09, and that's set at the legislative level, obviously. The county rate is set by our fiscal court. So everybody in each magisterial district has a representative that sits on the court. And then obviously our county judge executive sits on that fiscal court as well. So that tax rate is set by them. Our schools are set by the individual school boards, which are also have representation in different districts throughout that school board. The library, the cooperative extension, the health department, and the conservation, those are set by those individual boards and then presented to either the fiscal court or the city. The fiscal court and the city really don't have any say on what those rates can be. However, they make the appointments to those boards. And
Right.
there's been law change in recent years giving county judge executives more power on those board appointments, because a lot of times they would get flack over those rates increasing. I think more specifically libraries on that. But back to your original question, these tax rates are set by these people, are not set by myself, the PVA office, or anything, or even anybody outside of these individual taxing districts at a local level.
But I'm glad you asked that question, Craig, and I'm glad that we're showing what these 24 and 25 rates are, because that leads into what do these numbers mean? Because some people may say, I see the numbers here. Does that mean dollars and cents? Well, it doesn't. Those are percentage rates. And then it goes into percentage of what? And that is the value of real property. And I think that's where a lot of people are having questions about, like, why am I getting a larger real property tax bill, and how does that affect it? Well, based upon these numbers right here, this is your multiplier of
Right.
those numbers. And so
A
I think,
$100,000 house
yeah,
on the 2025 library tax will cost you $73 of your tax will go to the library.
Correct. And I think it's important to point out too, as well, if you look down at the total city and county combined in 24, it was 17.38. And then in 25, that same figure was 16.8. So there was a drop there. In all, I think every taxing entity except the county school went up 1/100th, from 7.41 to 7.42. So all entities have actually gone down, and that comes from assessments. And I really look for, now that we're assessing things in accordance to the law, for these rates to continue to drop. So and I know we're going to get into this a little more in the following few minutes, but you know, the area that was reassessed this time, all the other parts of the county that haven't been reassessed are going to quote benefit from that rate drop. So their taxes will be going down. And then as the rest of everybody else is reassessed, the folks that were reassessed this year, their rates are going to go down because everybody else is catching up. So
It's important that you mention that because if you have a city and a county government that are like, "Thank you, Will Rhodes, we for reassessing everybody, we're going to keep tax rates high." Well, then that's not on you. That's on
correct.
local governments and those local assessing districts. And if that happens, then your option instead of appealing, your assessment is to appeal at the
Feel the
vote.
tax rate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Kyle. And if you look at specifically the city school from, can you put that back up?
that's the city one.
The chart, no,
Next chart, the breakdown.
comparison
24.
chart between
Yeah.
24 and
Oh,
25.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, and this is more from my time at the Department for Local Government than as PVA, but a taxing entity is only allowed to take 4% over the compensating rate. And the compensating rate is what the value would have to be for them to make the same money from real property.
Right, right,
So they can only go 4% over what they previously had. Okay. Anything over that 4% is subject to voter recall.
right.
So when you look at the Old City School District in 24, it was at 10.75. Okay. That next year, it dropped to 10.29. Now, that's with them taking 4% over compensating plus a legally allowable nickel. So they took 9% over their compensating rate from the previous year, and the rate still dropped almost a half a point.
Hey, Will, can you explain compensating rate? I mean, Kyle and I know what it is, but maybe other people don't.
So a compensating rate, say you a county gets $1 million a year in property taxes, but legally they take 4% over that million. That's what they can take without that's what their tax rate would be to generate that same amount of revenue plus 4%. Okay. So they can do that by law without having any interference from anybody. But if they want to go over 4% over the compensating rate, then
It's on the belt.
voter recall. Yeah,
Yeah, but the
And they will
compensating
never
rate,
do that. Yeah, they will
Yeah.
never do that because
right, the compensating rate, that would just get them back to that million.
get them back to
Then,
flat.
yeah, if they say we're only going to take the compensating rate, then that gets them to $1 million. Then they can go 4% on top of the compensating rate, correct?
Correct. 4% over compensating. Now that's why a lot of times you'll see, people say, and it's not unique here, but they'll say we lowered taxes. We lowered taxes. Well, no, you didn't. It's just that the rates are going down so much that you're actually getting more. But and that's what I hope to happen here is that
Yeah,
now that the assessments are up, the rates will come down.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday, that the elected officials can say we dropped the taxes,
Yeah.
but they really didn't, because the valuations that the PVA did, they're taking credit for your work.
Yeah, I think Kyle and I talked about this years ago, and we were calculating tax rates. We did it for the whole state, but we were calculating rates, and Franklin County was 6 points higher than any county that touched it.
That's correct.
Yeah. 6 points higher than any county that touched it. Now, Scott and Woodford are their own animal, and they're super low for a myriad of reasons. But, I think Henry, Owen, Anderson, Shelby, all those counties that we border, the closest one was still 6 points lower.
Well,
say that in plain terms. Sorry, Kyle. Say that in plain terms, because Kyle and I have discussed this before. Is it what you're saying that we pay higher property taxes than the county surrounding us, or is it lower property taxes than the county surrounding us?
Our tax rate is I'd have to look at it again, but when Kyle and I were talking about this years ago, Franklin County was 6 points higher, a higher tax rate than any county that touched it.
Okay.
Now, that's not to declare any malfeasance on anybody. I
Oh,
think
no.
it goes back to what we talked about with all the exemptions and land. I mean, the state owns hundreds and hundreds of acres. Think about the National Guard base. I mean, that could be
Right.
a neighborhood the size of Masterson Station, but no, that's the raw facts of it.
But
Yeah.
I think it's important to discuss that because Scott County and Woodford County have low real property taxes, and people go, "How is that possible? Because they're growing. How do they have money?" Well, it's because their assessments have kept pace
Yeah,
with
Good
inflation
point.
and the value of homes and things of that nature. So they can actually charge you way less on your property tax rates because the assessments have gone up. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss in this discussion of my valuation has gone up, 105%, but I'm going to have to pay, $700 more annually or whatever. Not
right.
necessarily. I mean,
Oh, yeah, not necessarily at all.
yeah,
I was talking with somebody and their assessment had gone up $30,000. And I said, in all reality, you automatically equate that with a tax increase. But by the time everybody in your area is doing it and these entities can't take over 4% of compensating, the rate thus falls that even though you had an assessment increase, that your actual payment could either stay the same or even lower.
yeah.
So just an assessment increase does not equate to a higher property tax bill
Well,
necessarily.
and let's get into that just so people can understand how this process works, and then we can discuss some of the other options here. But talk to us about how the assessment process works from your position and how you go through the reassessment process. And I'm just going to put the map up here of,
Okay.
and you can talk us through that.
Okay. So Franklin County has almost 30,000 parcels. That doesn't mean 30,000 houses or apartment units or anything like that. It's just parcels. So every piece of parcel in Franklin County of that 30,000 has a value. Per the KRS and Constitution that you had up earlier, Kyle, we're bound by law to do that at 100% fair cash value. So what dictates the 100% fair cash value is the market. That's buying and selling of property. So you have a neighborhood where let's just say Indian Hills for argument's sake, that houses are going for $130,000 when they sell.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to automatically go in there and say, hey, every house in Indian Hills is now worth $130 a square foot. We're going to look at the highs and the lows. Are there any anomalies? We'll kick that out and then kind of get an average and get a feel of what houses are going for. And then usually we reduce the figure per square footage by, I don't know, 10 to 20, 25%. And then reassess there because there are, houses haven't been updated or it's got an original HVAC in it, stuff like that. I realize that stuff that goes to the market is usually in pretty good shape, whereas other homes haven't necessarily been updated. So yeah, we just assess the property with those numbers. And again, we only know what we know. We know where your house sits. We know the outside condition, you may have inherited the home from a grandmother who let a roof leak in the back and you've got major floor joist problems and mold and stuff like that. Come let us know.
Yeah.
And we can definitely make an adjustment for that. But overall, the market, I don't come up with it. The market really comes up with it. And then we kind of move it around there to again, it's to fairly distribute the tax burden. The number one call that this office gets isn't why is my property so high, my property tax so high. It's why is mine so high and my neighbors are so low.
Yeah.
I realize I just bought this house 3 years ago, but my next door neighbor is only paying a third of what I'm paying or what I'm assessed at.
They've lived there for 40 years and may not have maintained it the way that you have. That leads to this map that we have right here. you have this in 4 quadrants. You wanna explain why it's divided up the way that it is, and then what these quadrants mean to you as the PVA?
Sure. So this is Franklin County split up in a quad. It's important to remember, everyone thinks that, oh, well, your house can only get reassessed every 4 years or whatever, because the state approves the quad. However, going back to the Constitution, a property should be assessed at 100% fair value, really at all times. Okay, so a lot of counties do the quad system where they'll just go geographically around the counties. Some counties do 1 year, they do residential, all residential. The next year, they do all commercial. And then the next year, they do all farm. And then that 4th year, they kind of call it a cleanup year where there's anything they missed or this and that. My friend in Scott County, the Scott County PVA, he assesses the entire county every single year.
Whoa.
To where but it's not as crazy as you think. It'd be, since he has that base of new growth, he's able to go in and look at the CPI and the builder cost index and come up with a percentage to where, yeah, you're being reassessed, but it's only 2.1%. So every 4 years, you're not having that huge 10-15% jump.
Right.
It's just a yearly too. So the state allows you to do the quad. Right now, we are on the quad. This year, we did quad 3, which is bound by the Kentucky River to the east, out Mills Lane, Nineveh Road.
Huntington Woods.
What's that?
Huntington Woods.
Huntington. Well, yeah, Huntington Woods, a little further to the south. Then out Green Wilson and Evergreen, kind of bound there by the interstate, and then dipped off into Cloverdale, Thistleton, Bentwoods, Twin Oaks, and South Frankfort. So, but it's bound by the river on the north side as well. So not all of downtown, just kind of the South Frankfort part of it.
Is there any? I know this question came up. We'll move on here real quick on this, but is there any obligation or restriction, I should say, on how much that assessment can go up, or is it's real value, it's actual value, right? Actual cash value,
right? Fair cash value that would bring between a willing buyer and a willing seller. So no, in Kentucky, there's not a cap. I know in other states there are. Matter of fact, we had somebody call from California and says, well, I know in California, it can only be assessed at 50%, and it looks like you all do that too. So no,
anything California does. So
you're right. I said no. It's supposed to be 100% fair cash value. So
okay. So my next question is, on looking at this map, you did quad 3 this year. What can you tell us what your plans are over the next couple of years with regard to this map and assessments? Do you know what that is yet?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go from, you would think we'd go to 3 to 4, but we're going to go to 1 and 2 and kind of go clockwise there, because if we don't do it and do it in a hurry, then our friends in the 3rd district that was just reassessed, they're going to be shouldering the bulk until we get everybody kind of evened out.
And there's a new development right there, right? So is the new development going to be in section 1, the target area? Is that on that side, or are we?
No, it's in 3, isn't it?
Is it in 3? Okay.
By looking at that map, isn't it at 3?
No, because it was funny. You had 2 different. Yes, you're right, Craig. You're right. Yeah. Because
it's right there. Yeah, it's right there. In that little area that snuck in. So
yeah, the east side of 127 South is in 3, and then
okay,
yeah.
All right.
But one thing that I've seen is, it wasn't asked today, but I've seen it at times. Where you see people walking through their yards or walking around their house, they always blame the PVA. But your vehicles, are they marked? And is your person that is checking things, if he does get out of his vehicle, isn't he got a PVA shirt or something on?
So our vehicles are marked clearly on the sides. It says Franklin County PVA, and our person has a little lapel ID that they would wear. in all honesty, there's not a lot of times where he would even get out of the vehicle. He could
Right.
roll the window down and take a picture. Unless by law, we're not allowed to go in a home unless it's under construction.
Hmm.
But
But
if
you can go in the
somebody,
backyard though, right?
yeah,
You can, but
Yeah.
we don't. So if you've had anybody lurking around your home that says they're the PVA, they are not.
good. That's good to know, especially for some of our older folks.
Well, yeah.
Uh,
And so on the photos that you've got, how do you acquire those photos of the properties?
Sure. So a lot of when I first came in, all of our photos were done manually. You know, somebody would be in front of the home and take a picture. Since then, I've contracted with a company that comes in and places a camera on top of a vehicle and has our parcel data within that camera and computer software that basically they can just drive the street and a camera spins around and takes images of the parcels. That was done last May. So those are our most up to date. Now, if something's new construction or a wonky view, we will go back there and manually take a picture. And a lot of stuff, he was only able to go on public roads. So
right.
if
Yeah.
somebody had a long
Yeah.
driveway, we would get up in there and do that. But our vehicles are clearly marked. Our vehicle, we're never going to try to surprise anybody or anything like that. Going back to how we acquire our pictures, Craig, our aerials are flown by a company called Eagle View. When you see that topographical view on our website, that's flown by Eagle View that has a plane that comes down from New York State and then just kind of mows the grass of the county, I like to say, and gets the imagery. And going back to that flood, that company was invaluable for the state to get declared a federal emergency when they flew that when the river was at its crest, and able to get that and get those valuations and get that data to our state command center as well as FEMA and get that declaration done. So there's some value to these companies and your PVA office as well.
Well, and I think it's important that one of the things that people have talked about online uh, and on social media is, hey, your property has probably not been assessed for a while. That's not necessarily the case, because if there's been a cash if there's been a transaction of a purchase of the house, there is an assessment. But
Yeah.
there has been some assessments. Now, has there been a global assessment of Franklin County in a while? We can't say for sure, but I think you would say that you have a plan to assess everything to make sure that everyone's carrying the same burden of the tax burden, correct?
Correct. It's about being fair and equitable to me. Again, I go back to those phone calls I get, and a lot of time it's from young people that'll buy a home, and just because they're next to someone that's been there for 25 years, their assessment will obviously be what they purchased it at. But then where their neighbor hasn't, there's not been a transaction on that property, it's sometimes 3 to 4x difference.
Right.
And especially for young people, I mean, the more money they're paying in property taxes, the less that they're eating at our pizza restaurants and going and
Oh,
shopping
we
in
don't
our
like
stores.
that.
Yeah. Greg doesn't like that.
Well,
So the whole thing is about fair and equal. There's no, in my book, there's nobody, and per law, there's nobody that should be assessed differently than another one. Even tax exempt properties should be assessed
Agreed.
to the property.
Yeah. Because that changes hands. Sometimes tax exempt
Yeah.
entities
Yeah.
own property, and then it transitions to someone who's not tax exempt.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people are getting their assessments in the mail, and they are, immediately upset. My tax bill is going to go up, and let's talk about what is the process for appeal or a conference or a discussion with you, because you talked about bring that information to us. You have a notice that you've put out here that I'll put up on the board here
Yeah.
about what their options are at this point. I'll let you talk through what will happen at these.
Yeah, so this or some version of it will actually be in the State Journal on Saturday. And yeah, our notices went out this Monday, and then we've started getting phone calls to set up a conference between myself and or a deputy that states your case why you may think your assessment is wrong.
Right.
Um, and then that would happen. You come in, you bring maybe an appraisal, maybe a insured value, maybe like we talked about some damage to the home. Maybe you bring in some pictures of that, and then we go from there. And I'll say, well, yeah, man, golly, I hate
Makes
that.
perfect sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's get you adjusted here. Um, so yeah, you do that. If we're not able to come to some kind of understanding on the value, and agree, if you still feel aggrieved, at that point you would go to the local board of appeals that the county clerk actually facilitates. So then at the same time, then you would bring in, maybe some comps from the neighborhood, again, an appraisal, insurance replacement costs, so on and so forth, to where that board's made up of local real estate professionals and appraisers that kind of gets another set of eyes on it and say, well, maybe we'll miss something, or we just can't agree. And I say, well, you know what, if you don't agree with me, then maybe a fresh set of eyes will give you the relief that you have a right to. All this is your right. You're not. You have 100% right to appeal, and even if you didn't get a reassessment notice, and you don't have to wait for that, you can appeal your assessment at any time within those 2 weeks, because a lot of times we'll have people that they'll want to kind of not argue, but contest their assessment when they get their property tax bill. Well, by then we can't, because everything's on a calendar, and these local entities have set their rates based on that number. So we can't change it because they've already set their tax calendar in motion. But yeah, so from there at the local board of assessments, if you still are not satisfied with that, you can move on to the state level. And the state level is done by a hearing officer in the finance cabinet. And then I've never heard of it before. I'm sure it's happened, but after that, if you don't want, then you can actually file suit in circuit court, I believe.
Yeah, Franklin Court.
Kyle, go back to that previous screen you had up, because we didn't talk about the dates of the assessment. Can you go over
Right.
that, Will?
Yeah, you can call the office anytime. If you're hearing this right now, and we'll be closed at 4:30, but by the time you
By the time this posts, but you're open tomorrow, Monday through Friday, right? So
absolutely. You want to call our office and set up a time. We're scheduling those right now. I think we've got a few, and schedule a time. We'll give you 30 minutes. And we don't really want to do walk-ins, because a lot of people, and we want to give you the time that you deserve to state your case and get that adjusted, hopefully. But yeah, call our office and set up a time, and we'll be more than glad to sit down and talk to you about your assessment, your neighborhood, what things are going for, and why that number looks the way it is. There's something called the Kentucky Taxpayers Bill of Rights, that every taxpayer has a right to appeal. And if you feel like you need to, by all means, please exercise that right through our office. And if you want to go a step further to the local and state board, I'll help you do that.
Well, I know that makes people feel a lot better that they have an elected official who wants to help them, not just and take that
case. No, I'm a strong believer in public service. Both my parents were in it. I've chosen to do my work in this field, and I think to kind of get off on a side trail, I know doing business in Frankfurt's always kind of gotten a bad name, and I want to do my part to kind of change that. So I think being open and honest and transparent and helpful goes a long way to doing that, and educating people. And that's why I thank you guys again for having me on here today.
Well, it's our pleasure. Another question I want to ask you about. A lot of folks don't even know that there is a homestead exemption. They don't know they qualify for it. They don't know that it's not just age related, but there's disability related exemptions. Will you talk a little bit about that and the process that goes into it, and what it means to people? Because a lot of folks just don't even know what it means.
Correct. The homestead exemption is for those that are over the age of 65.
Greg.
And
Yep.
right now, and what that does is allows them to take the current figure is $49,100 off of their taxable assessment. So if you have a $100,000 assessed property, once you sign up for the homestead exemption, it would lower that $100,000 property to 50,900.
Yeah.
Okay, so that that 59,100 would be the only thing, would be the amount, the assessed amount that your property is taxed on. So in that case, it's about 50%. Now, if you've got a $200,000 home or 3,000, but that figure actually changes about every 3 years, and that's set by the Kentucky State Legislature.
That's
So
a big question.
signing up for the homestead is as easy as coming down here and bringing a photo ID showing that you live in that property and you did as of January 1st of this tax year, and boom, you're there.
That's what I did.
You don't have to do it yearly. Once you're in there, you're in there. So I encourage anybody who qualifies and over the age of 65 to please come down and get that homestead exemption. And then with disability, you got to be 100% disabled. And all we would need is a declaration letter showing that you're disabled. They used to make you prove that yearly, but now that's a one-time deal only as well. Just bring your determination letter down and we'll get that put on your property card. And that is the same amount as the homestead exemption of the 49,100. There was a lot of legislative movement and then ended up being lack thereof on the homestead exemption, and different caps, as we all spoke about before, on seniors and stuff like that. That unfortunately did not go anywhere. But again, once it is and when it is, we'll apply it. I mean, all we're here to do is administrate the policy set forth by law.
Right.
So it's not up to me to have an opinion on it, whether it should have one way or the other. Once it's set, I'm here to administer those policies.
And going back to what we talked about earlier, once you have the assessments, then all of a sudden the compensating rate and the taxes that go into that are essentially, if everyone's property value goes up, which for lack of a better term, they hadn't been on a regular basis, but now that they are, all of a sudden that tax burden is lessened by those with higher property values. So we all share the burden. So everyone's taxable amount on their real property should, in theory, go down based on that. And look at Scott County and Woodford County as examples.
And then from that point, on a more macro level, then you're able to have more outside investment.
Oh,
because I never will forget, I was talking to my optometrist. He was from Indiana. His wife was going to work in Lexington, and he knew he was going to work in Frankfort. He was going to open a practice here. And moving from Indiana, he said, I looked I did my research and found out where the tax rates were, and we decided to move to Georgetown instead of Frankfort because of the tax rate.
Sure.
That's sad to hear.
Yeah, it really is. And I think people don't realize that correlation and how that works.
Sure.
Will, I know before we get out of here, I know you have a great staff. I know you probably want to brag on them just a minute before we get out of here, but tell us a little bit about your staff and who helps you out and what they do around your office.
Sure. Right now, we've got a great group. I inherited a good group from Kelly Lang. My chief deputy is Amanda Patrick. She does it all.
Yeah.
And then we've got Rachel Brown, who's awesome, and she does a lot of our sketching you see, and then deals with different tangible personal property returns we do. And then Nora Beasley's been with us now for about 6 months. She was down in the clerk's office. I actually stole her from Jeff. And then we've got Mackenzie Ganagi, who's been with us now. And then David Anglin has been here, I think about 15 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's who you'd see in the in the field, and then I've got here in June, I've got my chief deputy that retired in January. She's going to come back and work part-time, so we're excited about that. And we're all here to be of service to Franklin County. Call us. If we think we can do anything, please reach out, and we'll be more than glad to help.
What's that telephone number, just in case people don't see the screen? What's it?
Yeah, for the telephone number to set up a conference, if you'd like, it's 502-875-8780. We're located right above the county clerk's office. We're on the second floor of the clerk, what's known, I guess, as the clerk's office in the county courthouse annex. And it's on 313 West Main. And again, we're on the second floor. So yeah, if you want to call and schedule a conference to talk about your assessment, please do so. Leave your phone number, because I'll probably try to call you back before you even have to come down here and see if we can work it out on the phone. No, I know parking down here can be a
fun, right?
There is a parking garage down there.
There is a parking garage down there. I will tell you. So, Craig's got a couple of questions for you that came from some folks that wanted to
Friends of
ask.
ours, yeah.
Yeah, before we get out.
There are 4 questions, probably pretty quick.
Sure.
So I'll go through them. The first one is, I'm going to read them verbatim.
Okay.
Did they considered the effect on renters and fixed income retirees?
Well, there's no provision for that, really. I think on your fixed income retirees, that goes back to the homestead exemption. And everybody's got their own budgets and familiar situations and stuff like that. But
yeah. And the next one was, how could citizens legally require a 15% maximum annual valuation percentage increase cap?
Sure. Well, that would be done at a statutory level. So that would be calling your state representative and other state representatives and saying, this is what we'd like to see, and enacting that legislation. Again, no matter what the statutory guidelines are, we're going to apply them. So yeah, I would not be. I would reach out to your elected officials and say, hey, this is it. And I know that's. I know Julie Rocky Adams. I saw a Facebook post she had.
Oh, she's hot, isn't she?
Senator out of Louisville. Yeah. So again, I thought we were going to see some traction this year on some changes, and but
I bet you do next year, now that Jefferson County and Fayette County are feeling this.
Yeah, and there's another guy running for office that wants to eliminate property taxes completely, Shannon Dennison.
Yeah.
So next, third or fourth question. The third question is, the current valuations could be a reflection of the success of the Bourbon Trail and proliferation of Airbnbs. Is that reasonable to tax unrealized gains by citizens, especially now that the market is slowing?
Okay. Well,
I can read it again.
No, I got it. I mean, the bourbon experience is part of our market.
Yeah.
It's part of our market in some areas more than others. I think, downtown, I know there's Airbnbs scattered all throughout the county. That is the market. I don't think that would be hard to kind of carve out. I don't know. It's part of the market, and as it cools, so will the rest of the market, and you will see these assessments maybe come down. But
again, if everybody carries the burden, then the actual tax rates should lower as well. So
sure.
while Section 3 of that map may feel the brunt of it right now, everyone else will benefit as time goes on annually when those budgets come out. Correct.
And yeah, and then again, Craig, part of your question there was to tax. I mean, a lot of these are questions, I'm not going to be too popular amongst some people by saying this, but hold those entities that are the taxing districts accountable.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think there's one person out there that can come in here and tell me that an assessment that's been done, that their home isn't actually worth that.
Yeah. And we're practicing journalism here. We're not making an opinion plus or minus. We're just wanting to follow the facts.
Sure.
That's why we got on. But the last question that I received was, the The current valuations are impacted by the exorbitant inflation of building materials and the real estate bubble. With the current stagflation situation, is raising valuations and in parentheses got taxes fair to our working population?
I mean,
That might be an everybody question.
yeah, that's more of an opinion thing. I don't
Yeah.
disagree. I mean, we've all seen everything go up. We get calls at least weekly and say, uh, "My mortgage payment went up. What's going on?" I'll say, "Well," I'll look in the dice. Say, "Well, ma'am, your house hasn't been reassessed in 7 years." I said, "You might want to call your insurance company
Yeah.
because your premiums have gone up." So,
Because
and we
your car
all know
insurance.
things. We all know things have gone. Have skyrocketed. Everything has in price in the last 7 years or so. So yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: the entities that we talked about, and this is a reason why our rates are so high.
Yep.
They're going to get their money to operate. That's either going to be through a tax increase or the fair assessment, to where everybody's shouldering the blame. Blame feels like a blame, doesn't it? Shouldering the tax burden equally, to where that rate drops, so
Well,
it's
it goes back to what we talked about, Will, that, all of the surrounding counties, we were significantly higher on local taxes, and people don't wanna talk about that, and it's really nobody's fault. It's the
right.
compensating rate to be able to pay for the roads and the schools and the things that we need, but you're not assessing any taxation. It's the local entities that assess those, but if the property value goes up, they cannot take more than what the compensating rate plus 4%, and that compensating rate plus 4%, they can't take more money than they took based upon that. So if that compensating rate is X plus 4%, and that number is actually lower, the amount of money that they can possibly take. So while you might have a 19.8 or 18.8% tax rate, that has to go down if
Correct.
everyone's property value goes up. So yes, the next year or two may be one of those situations where we see that transition, but
Right.
those rates should theoretically, just using math and the way that they were set up this way, should go down like they have in areas like Woodford County and Scott
Yeah.
County.
You're absolutely right, Kyle. And look, I know it was a jaw dropper for some of these people to get this reassessment, but to me, it's important that the entire county get caught up to where we can get those rates a little more reasonable, and then after that,
Yeah.
we can do your 2% and this and that. That it's just got to work out.
Well, the one thing the public can do when we're talking about our elected officials is the pilot payment in lieu of taxes that we get from state government. We all agree it's ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Should I know, I'm just going to say it. Our citizens should encourage our elected officials to barnstorm the governor's office and say, "Hey, we're getting 180 grand. We've got $3 billion worth of buildings down here that our city school system's not benefiting from.
Right.
And our city taxpayers and county taxpayers aren't benefiting from. Y'all need to up that up from 180 grand to about 2 million."
Because it's shifting the burden on
Yes.
us that are here. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, I hold officials top to bottom accountable and explain. They don't know your story until you tell them. And
No, that's an arcane law. It's 50 years old. Even and I know that Erica Hancock, and I know that
Jay
uh,
Williams
Jay Williams
and
Dan Pfister. I know that they are going to fight for Frankfort and Franklin County, and they know this situation. But contact them and talk to them about it, because it affects all of us. It really does. It affects every person in Franklin County. The fact that the state isn't paying their fair share. That's what everybody likes to use these days.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's usually, the rich aren't paying their fair share. The state's not paying their fair share in this case.
Correct.
Because, it is a burden for Frankfort to be the state capital. It really is.
We can carry that water when we have them on our podcast, when we have
Absolutely
Senator Williams and Representative Hancock and Representative Pfister. They've all said they would come on. Well,
Yep.
Two of the three have, I know. and we can put that question to them and say, hey, help us out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's very valid. I'd like to see something done as well.
Yeah. Well, Will, I can't thank you enough for being on here with us. I know you're very, very busy, and you took an hour and a half out of your day to talk to us. So we really appreciate it. And thank you to your team. I know that you're getting a ton of phone calls. We've heard your phone going in the background. I know they're answering a ton, and I know they're going to. One more time, give that phone number for everybody so they can call before we get out of here.
502-875-8780. And again, we're at 313 West Main Street on the second floor, right above the county clerk's office.
I want to thank Wil Rhodes, our local PVA, for being with us as always. I'm joined every single weekday with my friend Craig Blanton, and I can't thank you guys enough for this informative discussion. And if you have any other questions, drop those lines to Craig and I. We'll reach out to Will or call him at the number that he gave you. I know Will well enough to know that he's happy to answer them. But if you want to reach out to us and have us ask the questions, we're very happy to do that as well. Join us every single day. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share the podcast so you can find it on a regular basis. This has been great, guys. I can't thank you enough. We're going to continue to do this. We will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will see you guys later. Bye.